he would pick the smallest guy. Chimaev's a bully. And if you notice what he does in the division...
Khamzat Chimaev, the reigning middleweight champion, claimed his title in August 2025, but since then, he has not defended it, with 2 scheduled fights falling apart. Dana White has publicly demanded action, and Strickland has launched one of the most personal campaigns in UFC history. The situation has reached a boiling point, and the UFC may have finally had enough. On August 16, 2025, Chimaev made what many had anticipated. He captured the UFC middleweight championship with a unanimous decision win over Dragos du Plessis at UFC 319. The undefeated Chechen-born powerhouse had climbed to the top, dismantling former champions and top-ranked contenders with a brutal mix of wrestling dominance and knockout power. He wasn't just an MMA fighter, he was a force of nature that seemed unstoppable. Fans cheered across social media, and analysts heralded the dawn of a new era at 185 pounds. Chimaev's undefeated record became more than a statistic. It was a testament to his sheer physical superiority, a standard that made other elite fighters look ordinary. The division had found its most dangerous champion in years, but then, inexplicably, silence. By late February 2026, the belt had not been defended once, not even close. The man who had bulldozed his way to the top had spent his reign on the sidelines. Meanwhile, the middleweight division, once one of the most competitive in the UFC, had stagnated, with contenders vying for a shot but left in a holding pattern. Their wins and losses no longer seemed to matter, as the champion remained absent. The reasons behind his absence are complex. They include a minor surgery, a period of religious observance, and growing rumors that Chimaev may be more interested in pursuing a second title in a different weight class than defending the one currently around his waist. The first signs of trouble appeared in November 2025 when Chimaev revealed in an interview with journalist Adam Reeve that he had undergone a minor foot surgery. He described it as a small procedure that required a few weeks away from training to heal properly, but that wasn't the only delay. He also stated that his return to fighting would come only after Ramadan, the holiest month in Islam, which he observes by abstaining from intense physical training and competition. Given that Ramadan in 2026 runs from mid-February to late March, Chimaev's earliest possible return to a full training camp would be late March or early April. This pushed any potential title defense into the summer months, likely June or July at the earliest. What made the delay particularly frustrating for the middleweight contenders was the fact that the UFC had already tried, twice, to schedule Chimaev's first title defense. Both attempts fell apart. Number 2 ranked contender Nassourdine Ourimov recently revealed in an interview with Red Corner MMA that he had spoken with UFC matchmakers Hunter Campbell and Mick Maynard. He shared that the UFC had tried everything to get the fight made, but was thwarted each time, leaving the division in limbo.
Ils nous ont dit que, voilà, qu'ils avaient déjà prévu de faire le combat pour la ceinture.
December was the original target for Khamzat Chimaev's first title defense, offering him about 4 months to recover and prepare, a reasonable turnaround by championship standards. However, that window quickly slammed shut. The UFC pivoted, setting its sights on February for a potential defense, aiming for UFC Houston or another early 2026 event. But once again, Chimaev's body refused to cooperate.
Mais Khamzat qui s'était blessé et puis ça avait chamboulé un peu leur plan, mais en tout cas ils ont gardé ça dans le...
2 scheduled title fights, 2 cancellations, and an entire division of elite fighters left stranded in the wreckage, unable to make concrete plans for their careers as the championship fight continued to dissolve before it could even be finalized. Despite the setbacks, I confirmed that UFC matchmakers had at least kept the fighters informed, reassuring them that when Chimaev was healthy and ready, the fight was still the plan, and they would remain next in line. Yet, despite these assurances, the reality on the ground was starkly different. No contracts were signed, no official dates were set, and no venues were confirmed. The middleweight title picture was essentially frozen in time, while every other UFC division moved forward with defenses, interim titles, and action. Meanwhile, the frustration mounted, especially from Chimaev's own camp. Instead of focusing on when and where he would defend the belt he'd worked so hard to claim, Chimaev began openly discussing a potential move to light heavyweight in search of a second title. In a December 2025 ESPN interview, he laid out a plan to defend the middleweight title once and then immediately chase a second belt at 205 pounds, invoking the legacies of multi-division champions like Conor McGregor and Amanda Nunes. While his ambition was admirable on its own, it didn't sit well with contenders who were starving for a shot at a title that seemed to exist only on paper. To them, it sounded less like ambition and more like a man mentally checked out of the division he was supposed to lead. Chima's coach, Alan F. Nascimento, tried to offer clarity in late February 2026, stating that a June or July return for Chima's first defense was realistic, with the champion expected to begin full training after Ramadan in late March, but by then, the damage to the division's momentum, competitive integrity, and fan engagement had already been done. The cracks in the division were no longer small fractures that could be patched with promises of future activity. They were deep rifts. And one particular fighter, armed with an 8-fight win streak and a microphone, was growing louder, meaner, and more dangerous every week that Chima remained absent. Sean Strickland, the loudest voice in the division, had never been one to wait politely in line. He took what he wanted, inside the octagon and in front of any available microphone. After his dominant win over Anthony "Fluffy" Hernandez at UFC Houston on February 22, 2026, Strickland turned his attention squarely on Khamzat Chimaev. What followed was a sustained, deeply personal verbal barrage that only Strickland could deliver. The animosity between the two is not a scripted rivalry designed to sell pay-per-views. It's real, and it runs deep. Their feud dates back to their time as training partners at Extreme Couture Gym in Las Vegas in 2022, when Chimaev was still climbing the ranks. What started as routine sparring sessions between two elite fighters escalated into a bitter, multi-layered feud, fueled by conflicting accounts of what happened on the mats, cultural tensions, and the kind of locker room politics that continue to follow fighters long after they leave the gym. Chimaev has claimed that Strickland made derogatory comments about Chechen grapplers in a gym group chat, which led Chimaev to respond with aggressive threats. According to Chimaev, Strickland then showed up to training the next day carrying a firearm, seemingly fearing physical retaliation. Chimaev described this behavior as unhinged. Strickland, of course, has his own version of events. In recent weeks, he's provided his side of the story, painting Chimaev not as the fearless apex predator the public perceives, but as a selective bully who carefully picks sparring partners to avoid real challenges. The animosity has grown more intense with every passing week of Chimaev's absence, and Strickland has no intention of waiting any longer for his shot at the belt.
When I walk into a gym, do you think that I go find the little weakest man? I say, let's spar?
That rhetorical question set the stage for Strickland's central accusation. While he sought out the most dangerous, battle-tested training partners to sharpen his skills against real threats, Chimaev took the opposite approach. Strickland claimed that Chimaev deliberately hunted for the smallest, least experienced fighters in the gym, carefully avoiding real challenges to maintain his aura of invincibility.
Every time Chimaev would walk in the gym, he would pick the smallest, lowest level pro and say, but oh, he looks like my opponent.
According to Strickland, Chimaev would justify targeting undersized training partners by claiming they resembled upcoming opponents. A convenient excuse, in Strickland's view, for what was actually a pattern of intimidation aimed at fighters who couldn't effectively fight back. For Strickland, this wasn't just a strategic choice in training. It was about maintaining control over his surroundings by preying on those who posed little to no threat. Strickland saw it as a cowardly move, one that extended beyond the gym.
He would pick the smallest guy. Chimaev's a fucking bully. And if you notice what he does in the division, he just runs and...
The accusation that Chimaev avoids genuine challenges, that at his core, he is a man who seeks easy paths rather than hard ones, is one Strickland has hammered relentlessly across multiple interviews and social media posts. Strickland has made it clear that he believes Chimaev's entire career has been built on avoiding real tests, whether in the gym or in the octagon. He extended this argument further by pointing to Chimaev's stated desire to abandon the middleweight division entirely and chase a light heavyweight title instead.
So now I want to go to 205 and fight Yuri, who's not even the champ, dude. You just run and hide.
That scathing summary, that Chimaev is running from the very division he's supposed to be governing, hiding behind injury reports and weight class ambitions to avoid the dangerous men who have earned the right to challenge him, became the central thesis of Strickland's relentless campaign for the next title shot. Strickland punctuated this argument at the most visible possible moment, immediately after dismantling Hernandez at UFC Houston, when every camera and microphone in the building was pointed directly at him. At the post-fight press conference, Strickland was in vintage form, raw, completely unfiltered, and utterly unconcerned with the invisible boundaries that other fighters carefully navigate around sponsors, broadcast partners, and UFC brass. When asked point-blank whether he believed he had done enough to earn the next middleweight title shot, his response was characteristically blunt, leaving no room for interpretation. Then, Strickland pivoted, making his pitch directly to the audience, and by extension, to every decision-maker within the UFC's power structure. He framed the potential matchup as something that transcended a typical championship bout. It wasn't just about a title defense anymore. It was about proving that the middleweight division still had a champion who would step up and face the best challengers. Strickland was wasn't just calling for a fight, he was demanding that the division be revitalized and that Chima be held accountable for his absence.
You don't want to see any of these fight that little Chechen whore. You want to see the last American in the sport going fuck that guy up, and that's what's going to happen.
In interviews surrounding the UFC Houston event, Strickland went even further down the road of provocation, accusing Chima of ruining the middleweight division through deliberate inactivity. He predicted that the champion would sit on the belt indefinitely, only fighting when the UFC physically forced his hand. Strickland characterized Chima's injuries as suspiciously convenient and openly questioned whether the champion truly had the appetite for the kind of sustained, year-round activity a legitimate title holder owes to the division. Chima didn't absorb the verbal assault in silence. He fired back on social media, dismissing Strickland and reminding him, "I destroyed the guy who beat you," referring to his commanding victory over druggist du Plessis, who had twice defeated Strickland in previous bouts. This sharp retort was designed to undermine Strickland's credentials as a legitimate challenger, but it also highlighted the central tension that continues to grow. Chima's resume inside the cage speaks for itself, but his prolonged absence outside of it is becoming the louder, more damaging story. With each passing week, Strickland's coach, Eric Nascimento, added calculated fuel to the fire, telling reporters that the team firmly believes Chima should be next and that Strickland earned style points with his emphatic finish over Hernandez. Nascimento didn't stop at merely lobbying for the fight to be booked. He went a step further, outlining a specific tactical blueprint designed to neutralize Chima's greatest weapon, his wrestling. The plan was to manage distance with long strikes, use jabs to control the center of the octagon, and employ clinch work to dirty up grappling exchanges and prevent clean takedown entries. The message from the Strickland camp was unmistakable. They weren't just talking about this fight in hypothetical terms or wishful scenarios. They were actively, concretely, and methodically preparing for it, as if the contract had already been signed. The line Dana White had drawn in the sand was clear. While Strickland was lobbing verbal grenades at every available camera, Chima was sitting on the sidelines, nursing a surgically repaired foot. White, the most powerful individual in combat sports, had heard enough speculation. At the UFC Houston post-fight press conference on February 22, 2026, White directly addressed Chima's public flirtation with moving to light heavyweight and shut it down with the kind of blunt, unequivocal finality that only the UFC president can deliver. White's message was clear: defend the belt you have before you talk about chasing another. He told reporters that he wanted to see Chima defend his middleweight championship at least once before entertaining any conversation about moving to 205 pounds. White also questioned the logic of a champion leapfrogging weight classes without having fulfilled the most basic, fundamental obligation of championship status. His statement carried enormous weight because he explicitly drew a distinction between Chima's situation and that of Alex Pereira, who had been granted significant latitude to move between divisions, but only after establishing himself as an active, frequently defending champion. Pereira earned his multi-division ambitions through relentless activity, and his willingness to defend his belts left no room for doubt about his commitment. Chima, on the other hand, had been 6 months into his reign without a single defense on the books, and had not yet earned that same privilege. White, a man who has stripped champions before for inactivity far less glaring than Chima's, made it abundantly clear that the UFC's patience was wearing dangerously thin. The implicit threat was unmistakable: defend the belt or face consequences that would not require your consent. The pressure is now compounding from every conceivable direction. At the same time, Nasruddin Firmov, who had been the UFC's first choice for the title fight before injuries scrambled the entire scheduling timeline, recently spoke with matchmaker Mick Maynard and confirmed that the promotion still wants to see the fight happen. However, critically, no final approval or contract has materialized yet.
But nothing confirmed yet. And we spoke recently with Mick Maynard, the matchmaker, and he was kind to see the fight.
As the pressure mounts from every direction, Chima's reign as middleweight champion grows increasingly fragile. Strickland's relentless campaign and White's public ultimatum have left the champion with little room to maneuver. With no title defense in sight and whispers of a move to light heavyweight, the middleweight division stands at a crossroads. Strickland, fueled by frustration and opportunity, is ready to take the title, but only if Chima shows up to defend it. The clock is ticking, and the future of the division hangs in the balance. Will Chima return to the octagon and prove he deserves to be called champion, or will Strickland's unyielding push finally bring about a showdown for the belt? The UFC's next move is unclear, but one thing is certain: the pressure is on, and the time for action is now.